All right, so welcome everyone. I want to talk this morning about fear, facing our fears, working with fear, and what the Dharma, what the Buddha taught about it, what we know about it from his teachings as well as from modern theory and research. We all have fears. I mean, that some of us more than others. We have to remember they're survival based. We evolved to experience fear and anxiety to protect us from danger, to perceive danger. And they're really an unavoidable part of our experience. Um, and some are realistic, some are not. Some are real, some are imaginary. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm not going to dwell on this distinction today, but technically, fear is in the moment. There's a truck barreling toward me, and anxiety is future focused. I imagine this, I imagine that. So we talk about fear, and I think Susie mentioned or someone on Wednesday about the gift of fear, that book, and he's talking about an immediate threat there versus I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about, sickness, illness, loss, whatever. But we're going to lump them together because they pretty much feel the same in the body. The physical response is pretty much identical. I don't remember a time in my life, right? I mean, even going way back, that I didn't have a fear of heights. Years ago, we were in New York. We were up, this is obviously before 9/11, on top of the World Trade Center. And um, could swear I felt the building swaying. Um, you know, I'm not interested in jumping off, the tallest treacherous cliff or platform. I've never been a fan of walking to the edge of the overlook at Humpback Rock. If any of you've been up there, I have no interest in emulating the cliff divers in Jamaica when we go. I just keep me away from heights. Um, and many of us have those kinds of fears. And so it's both immediately when I'm there, but it's also anticipating I don't want to go to the top of that building. My wife hates enclosed spaces, so she always will take the stairs if she can't avoid an elevator. When I talk about my fear of heights, I'll often get a lot of folks saying, "Me too, me too." But the issue here is that humans, because of our capacity for thought and our capacity for imagination, we experience fear and anxiety on a pretty regular basis. If I watch my dogs, if there's a thunderstorm last night, one of mine is terrified, and as soon as the thunder hits, she's immediately trembling and frightened. But she doesn't go around imagining thunderstorms. She doesn't anticipate things. She responds in the moment to fear, and we go beyond that. We worry and think about what's going to happen in the future. We have this thinking brain, so we experience anxiety in ways that creatures without a cerebral cortex do not. And our imagination can just run wild. It can generate untold numbers of fears. What if this? What if that? And as I said a few minutes ago, this is a part of our evolutionary heritage. A certain amount of fear and anxiety is necessary um, in life because it protects us from danger and threats. It keeps us out of threatening and unsafe situations. And that was really critical 200,000 years ago when our ancestors were walking around the savannah in Africa, but less so today. And since we first gained this capacity for thinking in language, we've made up stories. We've created belief systems, religions. We've offered sacrifices. We've developed superstitions. We've worshiped deities in this futile attempt to explain the unexplainable and control the future, all in an effort to quell our anxiety. If we could only, make enough sacrifices or do enough rituals, maybe bad things won't come to us. And human beings have been incredibly creative in all the ways we've developed to try to ward off unfortunate circumstances. All of us, all humans in evolutionary history have lived with fear and anxiety. They're inescapable part of this experience. It's the alarm system. That alarm system, as I said, exists in all creatures, but we really embellish it. Now, the Buddha recognized this 2,600 years ago is a common part of the human experience. Remember, he talked about the five hindrances, and one of them was worry and restlessness. In other words, anxiety is one of the hindrances on our path. I mean, he understood this could cause tremendous suffering and could hinder our spiritual progress. So in modern times, with far fewer immediate threats, there's no saber-toothed tigers on my street. Um, the challenge is to manage them and accept that we can never be anxiety free and accept that we can never be completely safe. We don't have to worry about the same threats to our survival that our ancient ancestors did. So we need to find ways not to become consumed by our fear or anxiety when it arises, especially in response to imagined threats, especially when it arises in response to an uncertain future. We hate uncertainty, as I say here all the time. So the Dharma, the practical Dharma, actually, thankfully, offers us tools to change our relationship with our anxieties and reduce the suffering that they cause and help reduce that hindrance of restlessness and worry. Now, the process begins in terms of how we identify it. If we see the experience as a weakness, as something about which we're ashamed, then we're already not dealing with it very skillfully. You know, Fear and anxiety are not our enemies. They are part of the human experience. They are universal to all of us. Okay. But remember, the part of the brain, the alarm system in the brain, the amygdala, responds immediately to a perceived danger. My dogs have an amygdala. When the thunder strikes, boom, they react. The adrenaline pumps out, the cortisol pumps out, and so forth. They have no cerebral cortex. But even in our experience, that thing about you walking down a path, you see what you think is a snake, you feel that fear, you get closer, it's a stick. It takes a few minutes for the cerebral cortex to come online because from a point of view of survival, it's essential that that alarm system triggers immediately, and then we can think about it. That's a slower response. Okay. So what we're up against then is this immediate alarm system, which tells us that we cannot think ourselves out of our fears and anxieties. They've already happened. You know, I, I see the truck coming down there. I get out of the way. Then I think, oh my God, I could have been run over. So I can't think my way out of that response. What we know from modern science and modern psychology is we have to reprogram the amygdala. We expose ourselves to these anxieties, these perceived threats, when there's no real threat there, in a graduated kind of way. Okay, this is the acceptance piece of dealing with our anxieties. It's why avoidance is so powerful in perpetuating our anxieties. Think about that. If the amygdala never learns that there's no real threat since we've avoided it, it never stops setting off the alarm. It will continue to set off the alarm because it's never been reprogrammed to not know that this thing is a threat, like an elevator or heights or whatever. As I always used to say to folks suffering from anxiety disorders, don't get in a wrestling match with your anxiety. You will lose. The method of facing these fears, reprogramming the amygdala, we now call graduated exposure. The Buddha talked about it as accepting all experience and not trying to avoid the unpleasant. We accept everything that arises, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Now we've refined that in modern times so that we use graduated exposure where we incrementally approach that thing which used to evoke a full-blown anxiety response. Okay. So that the path to facing our anxieties, to accepting those things which make us anxious, we break it down into small, manageable steps so that we're not overwhelmed by anxiety and panic. Okay. And we can do this in imagination. We don't even, I mean, we know this. We can have, we can imagine getting on the elevator and getting back off and then staying a little longer and staying a little longer. Um, we don't have to even begin with the actual situation. I mean, there's been tremendous progress in understanding this and addressing it. But what's fascinating to me is it's all based in what Buddha's insights 2,600 years ago. He understood this. You know, anxiety and its close cousins come in many forms. Okay, worry, impending doom, physical tension, tightness, contraction, panic, anxious anticipation, worry. I said physical symptoms, all kinds of physical symptoms, chronic headaches, tension headaches, muscle spasms. The list goes on and on. All of these are manifestations of the nervous system sympathetic branch, the fight, flight, or freeze response that was, and continues to be critical to our survival. Okay. We've all experienced it. We've all been there. Okay. Now, none of us are free of this, but we all have different relationships to it. Some easy acceptance, some really bordering on total paralysis. And that's often a function of our genetics and our causes and conditions of our background growing up. If you have an anxious parent, we sort of model that. We learn to be anxious because they're anxious about constantly talking about how anxious they are about, becoming ill, about dying, financial ruin, relationship problems, a host of other concerns. Our capacity for imagination and language is a huge gift to humanity, but it also provides endless opportunities for worry and anxiety. It's just endless. We are responding in those moments to the frailty, to the uncertainty, and to the temporary nature of existence by feeling anxious. Okay? We project into the future. We respond to our inability to predict it. We respond to our inability to not control it by becoming anxious. This is the nature of impermanence that the Buddha taught. Think about this. Impermanence underlies pretty much all of our anxieties. Things are going to go away. Bad things are going to happen. Loss is going to happen. Illness is going to happen. Old age is going to happen. So to begin with, to change our relationship with anxiety, we must give up this fantasy that we'll ever be safe and that we can control the future. Okay. Remember, the Buddha taught that all things constantly change and eventually disappear, even that which is most precious to us. Okay. Losses, large and small, happen despite our resistance, despite doing everything we can to prevent it. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be prudent and put on our seat belt and eat healthy and exercise. No, I'm not talking that we just don't, make sound decisions, but I'm talking about things over which we have no control here that cause us anxiety. We take sensible precautions, but we give up efforts to control or predict the future in areas where we can't do that. I can't predict if it's going to thunderstorm again today and my dogs are going to, freak out. That's going to happen irrespective of whether I want it to or not. If I hold on to this belief or try to that I can avoid all future danger or loss, I'm gonna be anxious. Okay. If we habitually see the world through those lenses, there's a very little mental rest there. Life doesn't even feel momentarily safe. We mistrust our judgment. We mistrust the reliability of others. This constant worry about the future plagues us. And it takes us out of the present moment. It takes us off our path, and it causes us tremendous suffering. We toss and turn at night because we're worried. We don't sleep well. Our stomach tightens, so we don't eat well, or we get, stomach problems. I mean, the list goes on and on. Okay. When our existence is anxiety based, we tend to move from one obsessional worry to the next. We are rarely able to be in the moment. We are rarely able to be fully present to the wonder of this life, to the beauty of this life. So the solution lies not in getting rid of our anxiety, but changing our relationship to it. Acceptance, letting go of the wish to control the future, which is why facing our anxieties and embracing impermanence, understanding it, seeing it as an unavoidable part of life is so important. So enough about that from me. Let's have some discussion.